And so, if you'll let me share at the end of this, I have a bold idea that I want to, like live from New York, live from Dave Bolger's show. I want to put something out there for the world to hear. And
all right. Dave Bolger here, and welcome to Had I Known, an exploration of the Hamilton College experience. This week's guest is John Werner, class of 1992. All right, we got a lot packed into the show this week, but before we get into it, I want to remind you about a special live Had I Known event coming up on October 13th. Hamilton has decided to turn the tables on me and have someone interview me. So if you want to check out a special live Had I Known, where filmmaker David Gaines, my guest from episode 2, this time he's going to be asking me the questions. That's going to be 7 p.m. on Tuesday, October 13th. Go to hamilton.edu and check out their events page and get all the information and register. And I'll have the link up on our social media pages at Had I Known Show across Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. I hope to see you all on October 13th, because that's been one of the great joys of doing this show is reconnecting with old friends and making a lot of new friends. So hopefully I get to see some of you on the 13th. And another great thing I enjoy about this show is not only connecting with members of the Hamilton community, but I've started to build relationships completely unexpectedly with other podcasters. In fact, I've recently connected with the co-hosts of a show called Doing It Wrong. Now, this show, my show, explores the path people take post-college. Doing It Wrong is hosted by two people on that path right now as 20-somethings. The show is really well done. It's funny. It's intelligent. And it's about the abundance of mistakes we all make. I certainly made them. And the obstacles that one faces while trying to find direction as a 20-something. It's hosted by two NESCAC grads. So, of course, it should be intelligent. They're NESCAC grads. And the two of them talk about their early career challenges, going on interviews, rejection, identity crisis. They had a great episode recently about dealing with failure. Really, it's a coming-of-age tale that weaves culture, relationships, and comedy, all recorded, as they say, in the land of Western dreams, Denver, Colorado. So check it out. Doing It Wrong, available at Apple Podcasts. There's a little NESCAC collaboration for you. And that idea of NESCAC collaboration is a particularly important one for today's episode in my conversation with John Werner. Now, there's one thing I want to share about John. He was excited to do this, and I was excited to have him on. And he came prepared. Now, I teased Amanda Daflos about being prepared because she brought a map of the school to her conversation. Well, John blew that right out of the water. So he was prepared. We had gone back and forth over email quite a bit in preparation for this conversation. And something that became very clear to me, both through the preparation for this conversation as well as this conversation, is if you put a challenge in front of John Werner, he is going to do everything in his power to overcome that challenge. And you're going to hear many examples of that. And now we live in a time where there are many challenges in front of us. And at the end of this episode, John shares some thoughts on how to attack many of those challenges. And to do that, he shares ideas on collaboration, the power of Hamilton education, the power of a NESCAC education, the power of a liberal arts education, and using those to overcome these challenges. It's a big idea, and I hope a lot of people rise up and join John in this new mission that he's laying forth. There's a lot in here. I hope you enjoy it. Here's my conversation with John Werner, class of 1992. Nice background.
Do you recognize it?
Is that the Kirkham Cottage?
It's actually Harlem Heights. It's the Pentagon. It's during the Revolutionary War, and this is where Washington would meet with Hamilton when he was aide de camp.
Yeah. Very cool.
This is the Pentagon before the Pentagon.
There you go. Made famous now, right? Made more famous than I think anyone ever imagined.
Yeah. No, I have a bunch of friends who are trustees of Wesleyan, and they thank me every time. They say, it's like that Hamilton has really helped us out. Lin-Manuel is a graduate.
Yeah, for sure.
So I have pictures of so Gene Long, the cross country coach, when he retired, they had him a few years after he retired, I think 2008, he was recognized for his contribution to track and field. And so for the alumni weekend, usually it's every 5 years, they said, let's ask all the cross country runners to come back and to appreciate Gene. So I came back, I gave a presentation, but that same weekend, Lin-Manuel came up and he was a nobody. I don't think he had even spoken at the White House yet.
Huh.
He got up and presented one of his first raps. And so, he felt like he needed to come to Hamilton College to channel Alexander Hamilton's energy.
Very cool. Very cool. So let's talk about your Hamilton experience.
I love my Hamilton experience. And I think back to my first semester showing up at the college back in 1988, there were two things that come to mind. One was I joined the cross country team. And I loved running in central New York. I loved running around the campus. I loved running around the campus during the fall. It was just so beautiful. Coach would put us in a van and drive us 10 miles off campus and let us out and say, see you later. And I look forward to those times. And
those were times before Apple Watches had GPS and be able to find your way back, right?
Yeah, I don't even know if I would have known what GPS was back then. And so the team I showed up for, we were lights out good. We worked hard and we accomplished all that we wanted to accomplish. Now, this was a team that the year before I showed up was 8th in the NESCAC championship. And that fall, as a freshman, I was part of a team that won the NESCAC championship. And I've been thinking a lot about that. And what was it that allowed us to excel and to do so well. And I'm excited to share the 5 things that I think made us so good. But I also look back at that first semester when I showed up to the college. The first class I took, I think I had 4 classes in the fall. The first class was Dan Chambliss's. And I was told that I should feel very fortunate to get into it, that everyone on campus wanted to take that class before they graduate. I felt like I had won the Willy Wonka chocolate factory ticket. And I'm sitting in the front row. Dan said, if nobody takes the final exam, everyone will get an A. And then he said, if one person does, everyone who doesn't will get a 0, and 0 times whatever you did in the course is 0, and you'd fail the course, and that would alter your GPA. And I was sitting in this class, and I was just so enthralled by this challenge, and we pulled it off. And I'm excited to kind of share the ups and downs. It felt like a game of shoots and ladders. Did you ever play shoots and ladders growing up?
I
roll the dice.
And I play it with my kids now. Yeah.
Yeah. So that semester was my shoots and ladders. And it didn't end like the Celtics season. We ended with a victory. And in preparation for this show, I was thinking about those two activities, those 2 things. And I actually talked to the whole cross-country team, everyone, and they can't wait to hear how I tell the story. And I actually reached out to the 63 students who were in Dan's sociology class, and I have some interesting anecdotes, hearing from some of them. But in thinking about those 2 incidences, it's made me think a little bit about a big idea that I'm excited to kind of put out there, that I think Hamilton alumni and Hamilton students and faculty could be intrigued by, and I think other NESCAC schools can be intrigued by. And so, if you'll let me share at the end of this, I have a bold idea that I want to, like live from New York, live from Dave Bolger's show. I want to put something out there for the world to hear. And
all right, well, that's an in-show teaser. I like it. I like it.
Yeah.
A bit of a cliffhanger. We'll come back to it. So a couple meaty things to get into there. You mentioned the cross country team and some key things you learned there. So talk to me a little bit about your experience with that team.
Sure. So in 1988, the cross country team final meet was not the NCAA championship. No Hamilton team at that time or no NESCAC team could compete in the NCAA championships. That was part of the founding governing rules of the NESCAC conference. And so what that meant was the NESCAC championships was the place for NESCAC athletes to really show what they had. And so I looked into it. The reason that had come about was Williams 10 years earlier in 1961 had a bad experience at nationals. They didn't like the way Wittenberg celebrated, and the school decided, you know what, we're not going to compete in national championships. That has since changed, and Hamilton won the nationals, the women's lacrosse team in 08, and Williams has now 37 national championships under their belt. But in 1988, there was no national championship, and the NESCACs was the race. And the team that I showed up for, if you look at its last 5 years, the year before it was 8th, the year before that it was 7th, the year before that it was 8th, and the year before that it was 7th, and then 8th again, and 6th. So we were in the bottom half of the NESCACs, and that team I was on, we ended up winning. In the first race, I remember we ran Colgate. We took buses over to Colgate, Division I school, and we won. We actually won quite handily. And then the second race of the season, Coach Long, Gene Long, he had an alum runner who was a professor at CW Post, and he also coached the cross country team there. And they were a Division II team, and we had never, we didn't know anything about them other than that they had an Olympic hopeful on their team. And they came and ran our course, and their Olympic hopeful set the course record that no one has touched since. But we beat that team by 1 point. And I think we started looking at each other saying, wait a second, I think we have some talent here. And then Williams every year hosts the Williams Invitational. I think it's now like the Purple Cow Invitational. And it had 30 teams show up to it. And I remember I fell during that race. It was like the racing of the bulls, how they race bulls in Spain.
Yeah.
I fell and cut my knee to the bone, and I still finished the race. I still have the scar. But it was a lot of people running through this mountain, and we came in second out of 30 teams. Bates beat us, and they had won the year before. And I think 2 of our top runners didn't have a great race. But the fact that we were second, we knew that we could be good. And then the final race of the season, the NESCACs, we won, and it was really exciting. And Hamilton hadn't been full NESCAC. We had been in the Liberty League and the NESCACs, and I think to date we've had 46 Liberty League championships. But that 88 team not only was the first cross-country NESCAC win, but that's the only team. Well, I guess golf is a team sport, but it was the first NESCAC championship, and golf has won 3 times. But other than those 4 NESCAC championships, Hamilton since has not had a NESCAC championship.
Wow. Wow.
And so do you want me to tell you my 5 reasons why I think we won?
Yes, please.
Okay. So 1, we had a lucky cheer, and it was Ouagadougou. Can you say Ouagadougou?
Ouagadougou.
Now, Ouagadougou was the capital of Upper Volta. It's since changed to Burkina Faso. I think I said that right. But for some reason,
not as good of a cheer.
Yeah, we said Ouagadougou, and I feel like that was a factor.
Okay.
A second reason I think we did so well was we had a legendary coach, and Gene Long had come to the college in 1953. He had been a Marine captain, and he came. He was a trainer. He helped out the hockey team, and someone said, "Hey, why don't you do this cross country track thing?" And I think he read every book he could. I think Bannister had broken the 4-minute mile at some point, and he got in touch with all of Bannister's coaches and figured out how that happened. And Gene became very scientific about training. He had us do VO2 max long before anyone was doing that, and he taught us to visualize. I remember got us to visualize if we were sea bass taking in air. And this was a very old school kind of guy, not a flashy guy. He had designed the field house. For those of you who may not know who Gene Long was, you probably know the field house because you saw a basketball game there, you graduated in it. Sure. And I remember going up to Bowdoin, and their field house had big windows, lots of light, and had green AstroTurf that looked pretty, and it looked good in brochures. And I said to Gene, why didn't you build something pretty like this? And he said, why would I do that? The runners, would get blinded by the light. And, he was just a very kind of no bullshit kind of coach. And he really recognized the talent of that team and had us kind of really reach our potential. And then the third thing that I think made us really good was this was 1988, 4 years after the drinking age had switched. And we as a team knew that we had the potential to be good. And we all committed to not drinking. And do I think not drinking made us faster? I don't think that in itself, but I think the mindset that we were part of something bigger than us had a big impact.
And was that a decision because you felt it would make you better, bring the team together? What was the impetus behind that decision?
Just, the team had been 8th the year before, and there was crazy talent. And they said, let's not screw it up this year, and let's try this. And I was a first year, I didn't know. I was like, okay, so it didn't seem difficult to me. It didn't impact my social life one lick.
Yeah.
But I think if you break down, what made us good, I think that was a contributing factor. Mm-hmm. And today I think the sports are at a whole nother level.
Sure.
And I think, would a basketball player, get sloshed, during the championship part of the season? No way. But back then, I don't think there was peer pressure and other factors.
Sure. Well, you're talking to a guy who played rugby, so as the captain of the rugby team, I was just praying that guys weren't getting drunk during the game.
Yeah. What's in your water bottle?
Exactly.
Have to inspect water bottles.
Right. Half the team was drunk from the night before.
Yeah. Well, maybe some people played better.
On our team, I think that was true. On my team, I think that was true.
Yeah. And so, I said I had 5 things. So the fourth reason I think we were good was we had some great runners, and we had 3 top runners that were outstanding. There was Andy Bartlett, who was 6'4", and he didn't run his first year. Now, the reason he didn't run was Coach Long didn't believe in recruiting. He didn't even believe in recruiting someone who was on the campus that was a runner. Huh. And so Andy didn't run his first year, and he was really good. And he had come to the college because his dad had gone there. And then there was Brian Vaughn, where Andy was tall, Brian was short. And Brian, I think, was 5'7", maybe 5'8", and he was 137 pounds, not a heavy guy. And in high school, he had run 4 marathons. And I think he was one of the top half marathoners for 15-year-olds in the country. And he was from California. And so the reason I point that out is we were still a more regional college back then. I think U.S. News and World Report had just come out, and places, who had never heard of Hamilton, hadn't gotten the memo quite yet. So I think that's kind of interesting.
Sure.
So he had to figure out how to run these 5-mile races when he had been running, 26-mile races. And he was our captain, and he was a math major. And I talked to Andy Bartlett, and he was, while Andy was like one of our top runners, he was very nice, and said that Brian kind of sacrificed a little bit for the team, where in races, he would be like a field general and say, hey guys, you got to get those people. And he would kind of make sure we were positioned in a way to be super competitive. And he had great leadership, and I think we were really inspired by him. And then there was, and he had come to the college because a Hamilton alum who was a brother-in-law of Gene Long knew him out in Berkeley and said, oh, you got to come to this college. He had not heard of it. And then Phil Sanderson, the movie Spinal Tap, when they say number 11, you know what I mean by that?
These go to 11? Yeah.
Yeah. So Phil Sanderson was that guy that in practice was just incredibly intense. And I feel like he took our whole team up another level. And he was an entrepreneur. He paid for his college. I don't know if you could do that today. by selling spandex. And at then, spandex was like a new technology. He had bought 20,000 pairs of running tights, which is spandex, and he silk screened them with the college names on them. And when he wasn't, in class, he was calling up college bookstores and said, "How would you like, hey, Princeton, how would you like a bunch of orange spandex running tights?" And he paid for college that way. And I remember after the RPI meet, he said, "You're coming with me, Werner." And he gave me a green pair. I felt like Robin in Batman and Robin. And and the two of us sold Head of the Charles running tights at the Head of the Charles. So we had three great runners. Now, a lot of NESCAC teams had three great runners, and three great runners aren't enough to win. And the real reason I think we won was because of our depth. And actually, in the NESCAC race, Andy Bartlett was with a mile to go. He should have won the race, but a dog came in and he tripped over the dog and he came in third. And Phil, maybe selling too many running tights, he had gotten mono right at the time of the NESCAC championships, and he did well, but he didn't do as well as he could have. He won the NESCACs the next year as a senior, but as a junior, he didn't do as well. And so I think the depth is really what kept us in the race. And when you look at our depth, there was Tim Button and Dave Mead. They both had two things in common. Both of them had their brothers run on the cross-country team, and both of them had their dads run for Gene. And then there was Nick Armstrong, who was another runner, and his dad also had run for Gene. And then there was Pete Lowry, whose uncle had run for Gene. And so I mentioned that Gene was sort of old school. He did not believe in recruiting. He waited to see who showed up and would coach them. And we won NESCACs without being a recruited team. And today, can you imagine a NESCAC team in any of the sports win without recruited athletes?
Not
we
at all.
won
It's
without
incredible.
recruited athletes. But what I find interesting, and just looking back at it, because I didn't know we had all these alumni kids, we had 7 kids who were children of alumni. And that's a disproportionate number. There are a bunch of legacies that come back to college. But it was because Gene had been coaching since 1953, and it was athletes in the 50s and 60s who loved him so much back then that they sort of oriented their kids, hey, you got to carry on the tradition. Another thing about Gene is he invented the hockey face mask, and the Hockey Hall of Fame, has celebrated him for that. He was a very crafty guy. So I think we won because of our depth. And then the fifth reason I think we won is we hosted the meet. And the championship the year after was at Amherst, and then the year after that was at Bowdoin. They were flat. Our course had hills. There was a hill at the beginning, there was a hill at the middle twice, and then we finished on the golf course, which not only was a hill, but it was a hill on grass. And the race course was not 5 miles, but it was a little bit longer, 5.3. And we knew that course inside and out. You'd run into the Kirkland Glen where, a lot of the other runners didn't know, when you'd come out, and we knew exactly what to anticipate. And so, those 5 things, I think, all kind of came together and created a world-class team. And I think we probably would have been top 5 at nationals. But, because of the NESCAC rules of the time, we didn't get that chance.
Yeah.
But I'm really proud to have been part of it. And it was a great team effort. And it was what a way to start college.
Yeah, that's great. So, but that was a campus dog then that tripped you guys.
Yeah, no, I
so much for home
it.
field advantage.
He knew the owner of the dog, and I wonder if that's put tension between him and that friend. But yeah. No.
So you start with a championship your first year, and then also as you mentioned.
Let me point out, I called all my teammates and asked them, how are you doing? What are you up to? And I got just some interesting stories. So Andy Duncan was our 5th runner. He did not come in because of his dad, having gone there, and he was our 5th runner. Today, he'd probably be our fastest runner 32 years later. He's a U.S. attorney in Vegas. I actually stayed with him. So if you think there's a mob crime ring that you want to uncover in Vegas, he's your guy. But he hasn't stopped running, and it's like the fountain of youth. He runs 5Ks under 5-minute pace. He does a marathon at under 5:25. I think he was at the Olympic trials as a 55-year-old. So that's pretty impressive. Brian Vaughn, the captain, he's a leader in endurance sports. He does 100-mile bike races, and he's the president of GOO. That's nutrition that you take in these endurance races. And he told me he's 1 pound heavier than his college weight rate. And then Phil Sanderson, he sold shoes, kind of like Phil Knight, but he sold baby shoes that were replicas of porcelain, of your baby shoes, but made out of porcelain. Yeah, you may have seen the brass ones, and he sold them on QVC. And I think that's how he paid for Harvard Business School. And he's run marathons in suits. He's won stair races. And he told me yesterday that he's run 22 100-mile races. I always get these emails from him and say, hey, why don't you call me, in the middle of the race? Because they're like, multi-hour affairs. And then next week, he qualified, or he got into the 240-miler. I don't know how many people are dying to get into that race. Jeez. So he's going to be racing for a few days straight. And then Andy Bartlett, Phil, his coach, who was a Wesleyan runner, had taken a sabbatical. And so Phil Sanderson said to Andy Bartlett, right when Andy was graduating in 1989, said, hey, why don't you apply for the cross-country job at my high school, Loomis Chaffee? Andy Bartlett's been coaching cross-country and teaching math ever since. And so I think there's a nice connection. And he's produced a lot of winning teams. They've won New England's, and he's won his league a bunch of times. And he's a top 100 Boston marathoner on a few occasions. And he told me next week he's going to be doing a virtual marathon. So welcome to the COVID era. Yeah. And then I ran a lot. I did the math, 6,000 miles of triathlons, and I've had some real sports highlights. But I'll tell you, running for Gene's machine is the top. And I did talk to Gene Long a few days ago. He's 92. Huh. And I asked him, how was it that team he coached was 8th the year before and 1st the next year? And he said it's like a sine wave, that everything just came together, top of the wave. And I asked him if he expected us to win. And he said it was a pleasant surprise. But Gene was quite a special coach.
That's awesome. Well, it sounds like this team today could still win some college championships based on some of those numbers you're throwing out in terms of these races these guys are running. Good Lord.
Yeah. So I wonder, I know in college now, it's like everyone has to swim a lap of the pool. Yeah. What if every Hamilton student had to do a 10-mile run back?
It would be another reason why I wouldn't get into the school now.
Yeah.
So start off with a NESCAC championship, and then you mentioned the Chambliss class. Let's get into that. So what was the class exactly?
So there were 63 students in the class, and I emailed all of them the last few days. Thanks to the Hamilton database, you can find people. It's if people don't know about it, they definitely should. So I reached out to a bunch of people, and I heard back from maybe a third of the class. And, people were really moved by the curriculum. A few of them said, hey, do you still have the syllabus? Someone wanted me to let them know what the books were. The course was about social life, and it was a way to learn a method for understanding why people and the social world are as they are. And Dan Chambliss had taught it for 8 years. It was a tough course. We read primary sources, Marx, Durkheim, and Levi-Strauss. And the class had students from all corners of the campus. All 4 years, multiple frats, multiple sports teams. I looked up in the students that took it, there were 22 majors at least, from psychobiology to math to religion to theater to physics. We had a little bit of everything. It was like Noah's Ark. And the students had a lot of reasons to want to do well in that class. So when the professor says, there's a chance you could fail this course, students want to get into grad school, students want to go abroad, students want to be valedictorian or summa cum laude. He was saying, this could be jeopardized by this project. The class had 3 written exams. 2 were during the course. There were 3-hour written exams. And the last one was the one that he said, if no one takes, everyone will get an A. And there was actually a catch on it. He said, if someone does take the exam and they think they did really well and they want to write 2X on it, they could have that exam count twice as much as the others. So he said, for some, if you fail the two courses, and there was the two exams, and there was a hockey player from Canada, great guy, who said, John, I actually think the only way I could pass this course, an A on the final is not going to help me pass the course. I think I may need to go in and do 2X. And so that was one of the chutes and ladders that I had to deal with. Campus lore had it that this couldn't be done. It was that the professor put it out there, and just because he says it doesn't mean it could be pulled off.
So why couldn't it be done? I mean, I think it's easy now to hear that challenge and say, "Oh, that's easy. You just get everybody to agree not to take it, and everyone gets an A." What's the challenge? So why was it so hard?
Yeah, it's the classic prisoner's dilemma, where two people get picked up for doing a crime, and the two prisoners say, "Hey, let's not rat on each other." And if they don't rat on each other, they both get a less penalty. But when they're interviewed individually, what is shown time and time again, the fear that the other one is going to rat on you means that you rat. And instead of two people, we had 63 people, and it wasn't just one class. There was another class. So if you're in one section, for all you know, there's 5 sections. There's an infinite number of sections. So you don't know. You don't know if you can trust everyone. And so he was trying to demonstrate that there's no way to build enough trust where people will just, release and not take the exam. So, when I was sitting there, the first minute he was saying this, I was from New York City. I said, I'm going to hire a bouncer, and I'm going to put the bouncer at the door of the exam. Sure. There was one main entrance, and I wasn't going to let anyone in. But then I thought coercion wouldn't go over very well. If someone got hurt trying to sneak in, like a bar fight, that would reflect poorly on this, and we'd all fail. My second idea was to get a bus, and I started saying, hey, this isn't getting out of an exam. We're going to take an exam in organizing, and we'll all get on a bus or 2 buses, and we'll go do community service in Utica, and kind of say we'll swap the exam. And so the swapping of the exam to that resonated with people, but then coordinating a bus, I didn't think that would work. And then there was a period in the semester where I was like, all right, I got to get everyone together and build solidarity. And there were 2 sections, and they met a half an hour apart from one another. It was in List on the Kirkland side of the campus. And I strategized about getting everyone together, but then I realized if just one person didn't show up, which statistically, is high, if that had gotten out, that would have, it would have been like a house of cards. Everything would have fallen apart. So I never got everyone together. And then there was one class I showed up, and on a whim, I took a music stand and put it outside a List, and I wrote on a piece of paper, I scribbled, if you are down with this effort of not taking the final, please sit on the right side of the class. And the chairs were movable, and I made a barricade right down the middle. And all like 30 some odd students in the first section sat on one side of the class. It worked brilliantly. And I was class surfing. I sat in the second section, and I was really proud of myself. The first one worked well. And the second class, someone came in late. And I think what happened was maybe I didn't tape the sign, and maybe someone, as they walked by, a wind current like made it fall over. Or maybe the student wanted to stick it to me and didn't like that I was trying to organize this, but someone sat on the opposite side of the class. And so for the 90 minutes, no one was listening to what Chambliss had to say. They were all looking at this one kid saying, this isn't going to happen. I know Werner says we're going to pull this off, but there's no way. And so that was one of the shoots that I mentioned.
And what was the thought there? Was that just to give yourself a tally of who was in and who not, or?
Well, I was buying some time. I was trying to build confidence. So this was like a mini exercise. Okay. So by getting everyone to sit on one side and make Chambliss, teach to this one side, it was a way that we could show that we had agency. And it didn't work in the second section. So that was something I had to overcompensate for. So the next idea was what really carried the day. And in the 80s, a lot of condominiums were coming about, and there were buildings in New York City where people didn't want to go condo, and people would sign a contract saying, I will not sell my, get out of the rent lease and go condo. And so I got a form. I got a lawyer to give me a form, And I went to the writing center and I typed it in. And this was a dot matrix era. I don't know if you ever know, there was a dot matrix era before laser printers. And I typed on a word processor and I printed what looked like a legal document. And I said, sign here. And then I just for emphasis, I wrote, put someone's witness initials. I didn't even know if that was a legal thing, but I just added it for drama. And I printed it on gray paper, and I bolded some places. It looked very official, and I handed it out to everyone. And you'd think handing it out to everyone would be an easy task. There was one guy, Bobby Sacco, who never showed up to class. And I was looking for him all over campus. I finally found him in the basement of SciU. And he's like, "You looking for me?" And so I got him to sign it. And then there was this one woman in the class who would sit in the way back, and there was a back door that many people didn't know about. And she would come in that door, and she had long gray hair. I think she was like out of the Addams Family TV show. And I didn't know who she was. And she wasn't on the registrar's list. And Chambliss made it clear to the students that they shouldn't trust me, that I couldn't possibly know who was in the class. And this one woman really baffled me. I was like, who is this person? Turns out she was Professor Kelly's wife, who was auditing the class. And so I had to figure out who she was. But I eventually figured out who everyone was. And I started compiling a document. I was up till like 2 a.m. at the Burke Library. And I Xeroxed everyone's signature, everyone's witness, and I cut out the faces in the Facebook, and I put everyone's face. It was like the Declaration of Independence. But as I started to do this and compile this, everyone said, "But Heather." Everyone said, "Oh, I would be part of this, but Heather wants to transfer to an art school. She needs the credit. She will not sign this." So if it wasn't for Heather was the but. And so, that was one of my biggest shoots down, that this was impossible. So I went and met with Heather, and I said, "Look, Heather, I understand you need this credit. I will not jeopardize your ability to transfer." And I said, "Look, will you join us?" And then I went one further. I said, "Can I have you schedule the exam a month early, so I can tell everyone that you believe us so much that you'll schedule it early? And then when that day comes and you don't take it, that we're on the hook to to back you up, because if someone were to take it, you would get that
give
zero."
it her. You already you put one on the board. Smart.
Yep. So she became she was a liability, and then she became an asset. And what's so funny is I've been emailing with people in the class, and this one guy who lives in Russia, he said, "John, that class was seminal, was so important to me. He wants all the curriculum." But that guy really was a pain in my ass, because he did one better. He scheduled the exam a week later. So if someone did take it, he would be eligible to go take it. And there was some simmering of what this guy did, and I don't want to out him on the show, but needless to say, that didn't topple the effort.
He put in his own insurance policy. Interesting.
Yes, he did. And so the exam came, and Dan sat for 2 hours. I stood out, in the door. There was no bouncer, no buses. I watched him the whole time, and no one came in. I think students were celebrating out on the quad. And at the end of the 2 hours, Dan walked out, and he handed me the exam. He said, "Here, this is the exam you would have taken." And I looked at it, I read it, and the question that took up 50% of the points was, a classmate of yours tried to organize a boycott, and it failed. Use some of the principles that we've been studying about this and write about it. And what was so interesting, I remember at that moment, I had never thought of what we were doing as a boycott. I always thought of it as, we're gonna pull this off. It's a positive. I see a negative is a boycott. I mean, boycotts can have positive actions, but that was the first time I thought it was a boycott. So Heather graduated from Arizona, a school in Arizona, and she now works at Sotheby's and has had a great career in the arts. And the salutatorian of one of the classes was able to be the salutatorian. He would not have if it wasn't for us. And it's 32 years later. I did realize that 3 of the students have since passed away. Meredith and Kim and Tim. Kim was on the cross country team with me, and Meredith, such a wonderful, just such a great soul. and Tim was a football player. So, time has passed. But I know for everyone who took the class, this was they had a whole semester to think about this. And this was before instant communication.
Sure.
People weren't calling their parents and saying, "Hey, should I do this or should I not?" I came back at the 25th anniversary of this, and Chambliss asked me to talk to the students, and I don't think they could get their head around the fact that parents weren't really involved in this decision. Yeah. And when I came back, I was getting high fives from people who had been away for a semester. It felt like a reality TV show long before reality TV. And, today they're trillion-dollar industries built on trust: eBay, Wikipedia, ride sharing. And I feel like this example kind of showed the potential of getting people to trust. And, climate change, having a group do more together than individual outcomes, I think is timely. And Chambliss didn't offer it after that semester, because he said that once it's been done once, then people can rally about that it's possible. That before it hadn't been done, no one thought they could pull it off. I don't know if that was too much information, but
no, it's fascinating.
This experience was etched in my brain.
Yeah, no, it's fascinating, and I know it's now part of the school's lore. What was it that prompted you to do this? So he threw the challenge down. No one had been able to pull it off. What made you say, I'm gonna pull it off?
I was a first year. I didn't really know how college worked. A challenge was put in front of me. I didn't even know where the bathrooms were on campus. It was the first week of school, and I'm like, all right, we're going to do this. And because I didn't have social capital, I didn't know anyone. People didn't know what to make of me, and I was just really thorough. I had to pivot a bunch of times. I thought it was going to be a bouncer, thought it was going to be a bus, and the legal thing worked. I mean, the other thing is, I think people thought that people could sue if they failed, eat one another, and get for damages, because it's in the legal document they're saying about damages, and so I think people thought they could sue one another for the tuition. And what I don't think teenagers or 20-somethings realize is there are breaches of contract all the time. So I think I had that going for me. But the other thing is, I think Dan Chambliss was a great professor and really got us to think about a lot of issues. And I think we decided we wanted to be a community. And, I think today the world is pretty polarized, and there are not as many opportunities to think about how to come together. The other thing is the Berlin Wall hadn't come down. The movie Red Dawn, with all the Soviets attacking us and all the nuclear weapons, mutual destruction. I mean, it was a time when we needed trust. There easily could have been a World War III, but there was a way we had trust. And I think we need more trust. These are bizarre times. I call it a Twilight Zone episode that keeps on going. I think maybe some good things can come out of this period that we're living through. And I think some of it's going to be about trust. And I think the prisoner's dilemma and understanding that we can learn a lot from it. And if you Google prisoner's dilemma, someone got a Nobel Prize from it. And in Google Scholar, there's been over 50,000 papers written on it. And there are not that many papers on how to defy it. So I feel like, Hamilton College, this is a win for the college.
That's incredible. Well, you made a name for yourself pretty quickly on that campus. It flipped the switch in me. The college became like a video game. All right, what am I going to organize now? And, it does seem like it was an incredible exercise in organizing, for sure.
Yeah.
So where'd you go from there? I mean, it seems like you could have easily said, well, okay, I'm done. I did all I could in my first year on campus. What was next for you?
I will say that I fell in love with the college. I fell in love with the setting, and I started going to the archives, and I spent hours and hours in the archives. I lost any sense of time, and I knew I was the only one going down there because my footprints would be in the dust that was on the floor, and I would recognize my prints from the last time I was there, and there were no other prints. And I became fascinated with what happened at the college every single decade in every square foot. And I would come out of these sessions, these immersions in history, where I wanted to just share what I had learned. And the Daily Bull, I don't know if they had the Daily Bull when
Sure.
you were there, this yellow piece of paper that was put on every table. Tim Twirtle was in charge of the Daily Bull. Today, he's an executive at Apple. He's in charge of the ear pods. I'm wearing some right now, and Apple Home. He was at Amazon for a while and was at Roku. He's quite an interesting guy. You should get him on your show. I put in the Daily Bull on Sunday. Who wants to go on a tour and learn the history of the college? And I did that all 4 years, and I was really, really proud of that. Every Sunday I would do it. No two tours were alike. It was like improv jazz. They went on for hours. It was like a dance marathon where people would say, you know, mercy, I give up. And people would just leave in the middle. But I had so much I wanted to share, and I loved it. And, you know, there's a lot of interesting history, and I loved it. Yeah.
So clear love of history, a very obvious ability to organize people. What was the plan for after school?
So when I was at the college, I started. I knew I wasn't going to study abroad. I was doing sports. I swam for 4 years, and I played lacrosse for a year, and did track. I knew I wasn't going to leave and there was too much to do. I had too much history to research and share with people who didn't want to hear it. But I remember feeling really lucky to have two college roommates, my sophomore year and my junior year. My sophomore year was Akihiro, who was a physics anthropology double major. And I mentioned him just saying, oh, you know, Einstein was a physics guy and he played the violin. And so Aki spent that year trying to learn the violin badly. And I would go to bed, him just playing it as he did problem sets. But Aki was awesome. He was a kid who loved the Beatles, and he was the coach and the player of a basketball team in Japan. He had gotten into Todai University, which is like the Harvard of Japan, but got a scholarship to come to Hamilton and booked out of Japan. And it was great spending time with him. And it was at a time when the Japanese were really crushing it in terms of consumer electronics and cars. And the head of Sony, I think, did a speech saying, you know, we're gonna really overtake the U.S. And there was a lot of tension between the U.S. and Japan in a way that there isn't today. And it was just fascinating to see Japan through Aki's eyes. And every vacation he would take the opportunity to go travel the U.S. through Greyhound buses and report back on what he learned. And just a great guy. I did a Zoom with him, and just such a wonderful person. And I felt very fortunate to meet him. And then my roommate and probably my closest friend from college, Jevded, he graduated in 3 years, came from Turkey, econ German double major. And he was just a man on a mission. And he ended up working at Goldman Sachs, and then started his own hedge fund. He went to business school. He opened up a desk for Goldman Sachs in London, started a hedge fund, and then he went back to Turkey, produced a movie in the U.S., and then he went to San Diego, and now he founded a company with some of his classmates that is doing 12 clinical trials. It's a multi-billion-dollar valuated company that could have profound impacts on our lives and life sciences. And it was just great to get to know someone like him. And I pulled a fast one on him, which I got him really stressed out. Do you want me to tell you what I did?
Sure.
So for a semester, I laid out the newspaper, and I would pull all-nighters. And it was terrible for my swimming career, because I'd show up and swim the mile having not slept, and it was not good. But I came back from laying out the newspaper one night, and I said to Jevded, I did a terrible thing. I spilled all the secrets that I know about the fraternities, the handshakes, where this goat room is, the rituals, and I put them on, page 19 of The Spectator. And I'm convinced that they're going to expel me. I can't be doing stuff like that. And it's already gone to print. What do you think I should do? And Jeff did got all stressed, and he's like, "Oh well," he had a Ford Escort that had a hole in it. You could see the bottom as we drove. He was like, "We'll go to every place the newspaper is, and we'll get it, and we'll burn them." And so for hours, he was like consoling me. And then the morning came, the papers were delivered, and he opened it up, and the page that I had laid out was the same page as the age of his birthday, or how old he was. And I laid out this full page ad saying "Happy Birthday," and yeah, so that was a trick. But Jeb is a special guy, and okay, so I did that, and then I organized some stuff. One of my classmates passed away. He was running the time trial for basketball preseason, the mile. Eric Trust, and he had heart failure, and it was really emotional for my class. And Eileen Slocum, she had the real vision here, and Terrence Moore and myself and some others in student government created the Trust Treat, which I think has continued. Mm-hmm. A lot of kids from Syracuse, where he was from, come up to the college, and we honor him. There was the World Record Relay. A bunch of us from the swim team organized that. I remember driving in Stacy Boyd's. I was from New York City. I didn't have a driver's license, but she had a car, and she had a one of those Volkswagens that had the top would come down. And I remember taking a megaphone and driving all over to the late shift at midnight that got off at the hospitals, and going to the brew-through, asking people to come swim in our relay. And at 1:42 in the morning, I called Hank Payne to say we did it, because we had 2,145 swimmers. So that was good. I taught a class on Star Trek. And then the last thing that was kind of bizarre that I organized was during Winter Carnival. I filled 15 trash cans with Jell-O, and we had co-ed Jell-O wrestling. And there was Wally Bressler, who was the biggest lineman, co-ed Jell-O wrestling with the Women's Center. And it was right in front of the Dean of Students office back when it was in KJ. And Nancy Thompson jokes that there's still Jell-O, on those walls. So that was fun.
Was that a sanctioned event?
It was. We had bales of hay, and we had a medic. We had an EMT person on board. But I certainly did get noticed for being a spaz. And I remember the Buffers at Family Weekend sang a song that I was a punchline, and the WAG had the top 10 pledge tasks, and number 9 for one of them was being locked in a room for an hour. I took offense, like, why only an hour? Why not 2 hours?
You'd only be getting warmed up.
Yeah. You may be feeling like you're doing a pledge task right on this show. I don't know. So Jan Coates nominated me for a board with the March of Dimes, and I felt like I'd been doing a lot on campus, and it was good to kind of reach out and help beyond. And I noticed some of the people who I thought had the biggest hearts and were the most compassionate people were part of this program called Weedico Children's Services. And so I signed up on a whim, and I ended up doing that for 4 summers. You show up at this place, the pond that the setting is on in New Hampshire smells like sulfur, but you immediately don't notice it, because you are taking care of 180 of incredibly special kids that at the time we said they were emotionally and behaviorally disturbed. I got to believe that that's not how you label them today, but these are kids that were in a setting, a residential setting, where 180 staff are helping them to make good choices to make sure they could function in society, as opposed to going down a route, being drugged up and not really knowing who they were. And I was there with all these social workers. I was going to say socialists. Bernie Sanders did live in my dorm one year when he was a professor. All these social workers and clinicians, which I wasn't, and that wasn't my DNA. I was an entrepreneur, and I got to run the school by the time I finished there. But I spent 4 summers there, and I'm actually really thankful that I did that, because the economy had tanked in '91. And, probably not too dissimilar from what the class of 2020 looked out to, and there weren't a lot of jobs. And Jevdet had got into Goldman Sachs because he had all the numbers for that. I didn't, and I worked with these kids in rural New Hampshire. And I just followed them to Boston. I became a Boston public school teacher for 2 years. And I did a noble thing. I taught. And I remember teaching at a public school that was really tough in Boston. And I had just learned that the Hamilton swim team had beaten Williams 135 to 100. The Williams coach I didn't like because he would run up the scores like there was no tomorrow. And I remember from the payphone in the lobby at McKinley School, as like chairs were being thrown and kids were being taken out to the police station for getting into no good. I was talking to the coach, asking him if he could tell me how the Williams swim team is. I purported to be an amazing swimmer that he would want. I got this coach to admit that Hamilton had in fact beaten them in swimming when they're like one of the winningest swim teams in the history of swimming. And so I taught in the public schools. I got out early, like 1:30 in the afternoon. I had a lot of energy. I went and helped a guy run for governor. He won the primary and lost by the second largest amount of votes in gubernatorial history in Massachusetts. And the guy who was the campaign manager was class of '88, Hamilton, Trip Jones, great guy. Love working with him, for him. And then I kind of like you, I started a show, a public access show called Yo, What's the Origin of That? I put my liberal arts education to work, and I was basically like Bill Nye the Science Guy, but for history and science. And I would have people on the show and interview them on public access in Cambridge. It was Cambridge Public Access. And I did that for 10 years. I remember feeling really guilty when I moved out of Cambridge. I moved to Dorchester. I still did the show. And I wondered, how could I do this? Because it was under the Nixon administration, the public access got created to make sure the cable companies didn't have a monopoly. And by not living in Cambridge, I was violating with that. But turns out my fiance I signed for her apartment. And so the years that I thought that I was, a deadbeat living in Dorchester and not eligible, I actually was, because I was on her lease. So I don't feel so bad now.
There you go.
And then the last thing I'll just say I did was I swam in a 10-mile swim. I missed swimming and I'd gotten fat. And I did a 10-mile swim in Boston Harbor from the lighthouse that Ben Franklin used to write about when he lived in Boston. And it's the oldest continuous lighthouse in the U.S. And it's a 10-mile swim in the Boston Harbor. And I did that one summer. And the two guys that organized it stopped organized. For 10 years, I kept that going. So, for all the athletes, and it's like 40% of the campus, do sports, not only sign up for a weekend race, but organize an event. And I had a lot of fun doing that.
That's awesome. So hearing you tell your story about your ability to organize people, it's not surprising me to hear at some point you worked into government, but it seems like rather than going down the path of politics, you started to get an education and pursued that more so.
Yeah, good question. I feel incredibly lucky. I teamed up with 3 other people and helped write a concept paper for a nonprofit. It was a startup. And I think we felt like we were the Google of the nonprofit space. I was one of the founding members of something called Citizen Schools. And it was a network of after-school programs in Boston. Middle schools in Boston got out at 1:30. That's why I had so much time. And middle schoolers were getting into trouble when they got out of school. And the reason they were getting out so early was so the buses could come back and get the elementary school kids home. And I just thought that was crazy. Yeah. And so we created a network of schools where we recruited the best of Boston, the best engineers, the best chefs, the best doctors, the best engineers to teach 10-week apprenticeships to tens of thousands of middle schoolers. And AmeriCorps got created at some point, and we got AmeriCorps folks to facilitate volunteers. Someone like you're in sports, marketing business. You could come and teach that, or maybe you're bored with your vocation and you want to teach your passion. Maybe you collect toy soldiers. I don't know. And we unleashed a second shift of educators to help kids during the out of school time. And we scaled it outside of Boston to a bunch of other cities. We raised millions and millions of dollars for this. Nancy Rube, who's class of '82, Hamilton, president of Edna McConnell Clark Foundation, that's the Avon money, gave us millions of dollars. That was really our lead investor for years. Larry Summers, I don't know if you've heard of him, the U.S. Secretary of Treasury, president of Harvard. He was our board chair. He believed it was such a good idea, and we scaled it. And, so here I was at Hamilton College giving tours, sharing what I was passionate about. In Boston, I was finding people who were passionate and saying, bring that kind of energy to these middle schoolers.
Wow.
And what we identified was that middle school was kind of a forgotten place, that kids who dropped out of high school really were dropping out of middle school, but middle schools weren't getting the best and brightest teachers. And it was sort of like the Achilles heel of education. And also volunteers were the Achilles heel of nonprofits. Volunteers didn't feel appreciated, and they were and we turned volunteers into our competitive advantage. And it was really, really exciting. And Arnold Schwarzenegger ran for governor, and one of the tenets he ran on was after school. Like, we were ahead of the curve on that, extending the school day. And as you know, I love the college, and I found a way to have an excuse to come back to the college. What I would do is I would bring hundreds of my middle schoolers up to the college, and they loved it. I had them play basketball against the football team, and we weren't violating NCAA rules because these were 8th graders. If they were 9th graders, we would have been. I had them play against the women's lacrosse team, which were so good, and they were so professional, and they modeled excellence. I had them do science rotations. Professor Brewer showed what you could do with chemicals, and Professor Jones would lie on a bed of nails, and Professor Gap, a biology professor, would bring out alligators and turtles. It was just awesome. And Doc Woods, who you love, and he's a part of your show. He met every single student that I brought up over the years that I would bring them. Wow. And of those hundreds of kids, 24 of them matriculated to Hamilton College.
Wow.
And Lady Cabral, I just spoke to her. She lived at the end of a dirt road because Boston didn't put asphalt down in her road from Cape Verde. She came to Hamilton, math major. She worked for Bob Moses for years, MacArthur Genius winner who does the algebra project, worked for MLK. And she's married now. She emailed me saying, "Hey, John, I'm married." She just bought a house, lives in Silicon Valley. Hugo works, does analytics. Shalise Baker, she works in Brockton, a really tough neighborhood. Jasmine Coleman works in Cincinnati, I think maybe for P&G. Liz Walzak. And these are kids who were math majors and Chinese majors and Asian studies majors, and they had never heard of Hamilton. And I'm really proud of how well they were served when they came up. And, many of the kids didn't apply. Maybe it wasn't a good fit. Maybe they wouldn't have gotten in. But their first experience with college as a middle schooler was seeing, a German class taught at Hamilton, or hearing the buffer sing to them. And it set a standard of what they should get or could get out of a college experience.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic.
And then from citizen schools, I needed to learn how to become a photographer to document. And I got really passionate about that. And I've taken thousands of pictures. And so a nonprofit can teach you how to be a communicator. And I also started going to TED conferences because our big idea was democratizing teaching. And so I said, let me go to the place where thought leaders are and kind of talk about it. And TED opened up a program where you could make your own TEDx's. And I made my own. And most of the TEDx's are people spending big money on the Sydney Opera House and showing off how much they can spend on a venue. I instead went a very different route. And I curated some speakers, and I really worked with them, and I had permission to work with them. And I ended up working with 1,500 speakers to date. And I'm over probably 400 million views for those talks. Wow. And the 9th most popular talk was one I did. And I've had a bunch of Hamilton folks give talks. And I wouldn't have done TED or TEDx if I hadn't been a nonprofit guy. So because I did a nonprofit and I got access to TED, I started doing all these things. And I didn't go to grad school. I know there's a lot of pressure. I think Swarthmore and Wesleyan have more graduates go right to graduate school than Hamilton. And that may make Hamiltonians feel like, oh, are we lesser? I actually think it's good for some not to go right to graduate school. I went back to graduate school as a mid-career, and I think go build something, whether it's a nonprofit or a startup for-profit. I think that can teach you a lot. And I'm glad that I went back to graduate school much later. I was a Loeb Fellow at Harvard, and now I'm a fellow at MIT, but that was much later in life. And that's some advice I would give.
Yeah, I
And
think
then,
I think people fall into this trap of that there's a formula that you have to follow, or these, step A to B to C.
yep,
And I think one of the things that's coming through a lot in a lot of the people I talk to, and especially in this conversation, is there's not one path, right? And it's you got to carve your own way and follow passions, and you learn along the way, right?
yep. Been at citizen schools for 19 years. And I said, I don't want to be here my 20th year. And I'd helped one of my speakers give a talk about femto photography. That's trillion frames per second. And he had a way to see around corners that the CIA and firefighters were very interested in. And I said to him, look, I'm a photographer. You do imaging technology. Maybe I can help you. And that put me on a really exciting path. I went to MIT. I was the head of research and innovation for the imaging group. We created a device that could take pictures of the back of your eye so you could get predictive analytics on your health. So one place you can see blood flow without taking a prick or peeing in a cup, non-invasive. We did terahertz. We did all sorts of imaging. And then I ended up going to India 12 times every quarter in 3 years. And we helped build a medical tricorder in Mumbai, helped build eye technology in Hyderabad, and then in NESCAC, a city that is of 1 million, but every 12 years has 30 million people come for 40 days. I ran a program where we said the future of cities is data. And I was basically running citizen schools programs with the best and brightest in India, with engineers from MIT and Harvard docs. And so I had gone from a nonprofit to now I was a research scientist at MIT and helping to run these programs. And that led me, and I love that. And now I'm on the board with the professor that I worked with. We just raised over $2.5 million for a digital health platform. And as I was working with him, I helped him apply for the Lemelson Prize, which, in Good Will Hunting, when they say, that guy had a Fields Medal.
Yeah.
Lemelson is the Nobel Prize for engineering. There's a story that Nobel was embarrassed when he was wrongly claimed to have died. It was his brother. And his obituary says, this guy's an asshole. He invented dynamite. So he gave all the money to prizes. But apparently he was jealous of engineers. I think maybe he didn't get into engineering school. So there never was a Nobel Prize for engineering. So the Lemelson family, a billionaire patent troll, when he died, he wanted his name to be remembered for good things. So he said, let me give $500,000 every year to the top engineer. So the guy I worked with was that guy. And he and I are close friends. So I went from nonprofit to MIT. And then from there, I started working with a company in Silicon Valley that had a device that it's kind of, how in Iron Man, he can see things and there's digital information over the physical world. So we created a device where you can get digital information over the world. And so I worked there for a number of years. We raised $100 million. And that was really exciting. And I created a conference on AR. And I think after the desktop, laptop, mobile, the next wave, and it's going to be in our lifetime, is going to be contextual computing. And it's going to be devices like the glasses you're wearing, where you could choose to be like the Matrix, be fully immersed, or choose to be like Iron Man, get information, added to you. And it's gonna be augmented intelligence. So AI is not going to be artificial, but it'll be intelligence that you can add.
Do you think Google Glass was just a little too, people weren't ready for it?
Yeah. So Ramesh, the professor, and I taught a class on computational photography, and we had 30 Google Glasses before anyone did.
Yeah.
And the students were all excited about it, but the students by the end of the course didn't like it. It was 2010 technology in 2013. It was a little square like this, and there was no hand tracking. You couldn't manipulate the information, and it was a heads-up display, but it was just too small, not immersive.
Yeah.
And I think they spent $1 billion on hardware, and I think it was a good device, but it was too early. It'll be like the Newton. Do I think that is coming? It is, but it was too early. But a device like that should have been for enterprise. Like if you're in an airplane and you're building an airplane, or you're fixing your washing machine and you don't want to call the Sears guy to come out, you could have a device on you where the Sears guy is somewhere remote.
Sure.
And information is in front of you on top of what you're looking at, having you fix it. So it could make everyone into people that can do things that they don't know how because they get step-by-step instructions, like cooks or engineers in the factory. And so it's coming. It's coming. So then from Silicon Valley, I then switched sides, and now I'm a venture capitalist. And we raised a fund. I'm a managing director. I went and raised a lot of funds, and we're writing $3 to $8 million checks. We've written 6 of them to direct-to-consumer companies. Data. I learned data in India. Mm-hmm. We're betting on companies where people want to get goods and services over the internet, and we're doing a trust and will. We're refinancing cars, mortgages, telemedicine. I want to do an education. I want to do a pets one. So I'm looking for 12 more companies to fund, and we also have an incubator where we have strategies, and we're looking for talent. So I went from being a nonprofit guy that was developing inner city kids to navigate high school to now I'm a guy with a checkbook, and I'm trying to find some of the next companies that could scale and go public and do really well. And I'm also trying to figure out how AI can weave into that. So I think there's a lot of pressure on Hamilton kids. Like, wait, should I be a doctor or a lawyer, or is that the slow lane? I need to have a big exit. And what I can say is, look, spend a decade in the nonprofit world, collect an interesting network, and become facile. Use your liberal arts education to be able to converse with a range of people, and good things can happen.
Yeah. So incredibly fascinating path as you think back on all of your time, back to the kid sitting in the front row in Dan Chambliss's class. Is there anything you wish you had known?
So yeah, no, I prepared this one, and then I have kind of like an idea. I want to throw down the gauntlet.
Oh, that's right. We had the teaser at the beginning. Your big idea.
Yeah. That was so long ago, you forgot. Yeah. Okay. So I never made a formal resume. Partly, I didn't think I had the grades, to get a competitive job, and I never set foot in the career center. Wasn't as robust as I think it is today. I've been to it now. It seems like a great institution. I never made a formal resume, but I had some desktop publishing skills, from laying out the newspaper. And I spent hours and hours making this timeline resume with boxes. And I would put everything I did. I organized something with pogo sticks. I put that down. The Star Trek class I taught, the sociology thing. And I created this timeline of all the things I did. And I spent hours on it. I loved it. I had a black and white version. I had a color version. And it was a way to show time, going from the past to the forward. And I in thinking now, I think that if I had kept doing that timeline resume, and I had gotten other students at other colleges to do a timeline resume, I could have anticipated the gig economy and the 1099s. And I could have connected them, and through the network effect, I could have created something really, really powerful. And this could be a way that people find talent and people get connected. If I just kept up with that timeline resume, and I talked to Dan Nye, class of 88, who was the CEO of LinkedIn. I said, hey, I did this timeline resume. What wasn't that the LinkedIn before LinkedIn? Like, should I have just kept at it? And he said, John, look, there wasn't broadband. You didn't have the pipes for data to go, and there wasn't mobile. He said, if I kept at it 10 years, I could have been the LinkedIn. So, LinkedIn has done quite well. And I feel like I was on to something before it became. But I'm really glad of the path my life has taken. And in preparing for this show, and I did some research and I talked to people, and I thought a lot about the NESCACs and where they're going. And I thought a lot about the sociology exam and collaboration, working together. And if you would let me, I'd like to make a bold suggestion that I could rally not only Hamilton alum and Hamilton students and Hamilton faculty and administrators, but students and alumni from other NESCAC schools.
So this is another soon to be famous John Werner organizing challenge here. Let's hear it.
Well, look, I don't know if it'll be famous. It may be dead on arrival. It may go nowhere. And if it really gets momentum, it's about the group that gets behind it. But I have some interesting things that I want to share on this show. In the last 48 hours, I've talked to a bunch of people about this, and I've had some people make commitments that I think this could be very compelling.
I'm all ears. Let's hear it.
Okay, so the NESCAC schools, they started collegiate sports. The first baseball game was between Williams and Amherst in 1859. So when we think of NESCACs, we think of a league. It's a conference that was modeled after the Ivy League, and it was formed in March of 1971. That means it's a year younger than I am, and that means this coming March it's going to be the 50th anniversary of the NESCAC League. And the NESCACs are incredible schools, and you have incredible resources. They're just dripping with resources. You have these students. If you add up the average SAT scores of the NESCAC students at the 11 schools, it's 1320. The brain power of the faculty is just off the charts. The campuses are beautiful and have amazing, buildings and settings, and they have amazing alumni networks. Alumni that are incredibly proud of their schools. And these schools have endowments that are the envy of other schools. If you add up the NESCAC schools, over $500 million plus endowments, it comes to $16 billion. That's a bigger endowment than MIT. That's a bigger endowment than Penn. That's 2 Northwestern's endowments, and that's 2 Duke endowments, and that's Chicago, UChicago, Cornell, and UVA put together. So these are very special institutions with very special resources. Now, in this 50th year of NESCACs, I think it's kind of a bizarre year that there are no sports, that sports are on pause. Teams may be working out, but they're not athletic competitions. Mm-hmm. And I actually think there are a number of national emergencies, and they're like cascading, and that there's some issues right in front of us, and then there's some issues that are not in front of us that should be in front of us. And I'm wondering if the liberal arts education, the multidisciplinary approach that the liberal arts schools and NESCAC schools stand for, should be called upon. And I'm really proud that Hamilton was number 9, tied with Middlebury and U.S. News and World Report. Even if we drop off the top 20, we could always say we were 9. And I'm really proud of that. But I don't think today's college students are saying, oh, I need to be a liberal arts major. I think people are worried about their jobs and wondering if liberal arts is going to be a pathway to jobs. Mm-hmm. And I think we need liberal arts more than ever. And there are behavioral and economic economists that show the benefits of liberal arts and this multidisciplinary approach. In the movie The Martian, Matt Damon said, I got to science the shit out of this. I think there are a lot of things we need to science the shit out of, but we're going to need the multidisciplinary approach. And like climate change, the NESCAC schools are all in a race to see who can be more carbon neutral. But why just have campuses outdo each other? Why not have students from across campuses try to help Detroit have a better carbon footprint? And maybe that could be a model for other cities. I think the ethics around science and engineering are changing at an exponential rate, but ethics are also changing at an exponential rate. And we need people to help think about these things with a liberal arts background. AI and machine learning, there's something called GPT-3. If you haven't looked it up, look it up. It's a way that you scour the internet and you could type in a few words and a paragraph could be written. So what's the future of AI if you don't have to write paragraphs anymore and the computers are so good that they can draw upon the resources of the web? What does that mean for communication, and how does that get used for good or for bad? There's issues of equity, access, diversity. What's our society going to look like? Majority, minority, the future of race relations, privilege, Black Lives Matter. The systemic, challenges of systems. What if NESCAC students could come together and work on these? So what I'm suggesting is in this time when the NESCACs the sports are on pause, what if there's some grand challenges, kind of like Peter Diamandis, who went to Hamilton for a little bit, created the X Prize. What if there's solution summits where NESCAC community members work together to demo ideas, things that can really have impact? What if there are NESCAC TED conferences where people come together across disciplines and talk? What if there's co-teaching across different campuses? What if we harness the network effect? Millennials get the network effect. They get Instagram and TikTok, and millennials are going to take 27,500 selfies in their life. What if we turn, their digital natives into like harnessing this network? The collective alumni networks, Wesleyan is tight with Hollywood, Hamilton's tight with New York City. There's Boston, there's environmental studies, the art world, there's the Williams Art Mafia, finance, Hamilton's tight there. There's languages, Middlebury. What if these collective alumni networks could be made accessible to the students to take on grand challenges? What if for job shadowing and job fairs and internships and externships and jobs just out of college? I know Colby committed their advancement office or fundraising office said, we're going to get everyone a job. What if there were types of jobs that NESCAC said we're going to help pool so that the NESCAC students could become made aware of? The multiplier effect of that. What if there were like a Willy Wonka chocolate factory ticket that could go out to administrators and students and staff and alumni to bring them together? What if NESCAC, which has athletic in its name, kind of like the Lord Jeffs, changed their name to Mammoth? What if NESCAC's changed its name? Ivy League isn't just about sports. Yeah. A name that said we were something that collected the best and the brightest and harnessed resources. There could be a day when other schools lobby to join the NESCACs. Maybe it's an engineering school. Maybe it's a Division I school saying, enough with sports. We want to be Division III to be able to participate in this. Samuel Kirkland, got the Oneidas, which were one of the 6 nations of the Iroquois nation. He worked with them. What if the NESCACs then started working with other networks, the historic Black colleges? There are 107 of them. The tribal colleges on Indian reservations across the lands, there's 32 of them. So I've been thinking a lot about this, and I think the NESCAC should be a 21st century collaboration, and that we should be more than the sum of our parts and punch way above our weight and be leaders for other leagues, not followers. And Dartmouth and Brown are dropping varsity sports so they can be more competitive in the sports they do have. Instead of NESCACs dropping football, because it's too expensive and it's 10% of your male class, why don't we add efforts around other disciplines that can help society? And, there's a trend with hybrid learning and accelerating remote learning, Zoom, because of the pandemic. Maybe this is the perfect time where you can get credit remotely to do these things, where you can take classes at different NESCAC schools as you're a residential student. And there's going to be consolidations of schools. And, that may not happen in NESCACs because we're so research rich, but maybe we can show, what the NESCAC network could turn into. The bones in our ear were originally so fish could, go up and down. It wasn't to here, and they evolved into something else. Maybe our athletic league could evolve into something else. So let me tell you what I've been doing the last 48 hours. I talked to John Abley, who is
I was going to so it was going to be my question is, it's clearly a brilliant idea. I think that there's long been the notion of the NESCAC schools meant more than just athletics, even though athletics is in the name. To do something with that meaning is a brilliant idea. So I was going to ask the guy who's good at pulling this sort of stuff off, how do we do it? And you're already going to tell me because you've already started talking to people about it. Yeah. So how do we make it happen?
Yeah. So I'm really excited about this, and I want to use your radio show, to put this out there. Okay. And I talked to John Abley, who graduated from Amherst. He's the founding chairman of First Robotics. That's where they take over football stadiums and have kids build robots. He's also one of the wealthiest Amherst grads in the history of Amherst. I said, what do you think of this idea? And he said, misinformation. He's really worried about misinformation. What if you got a bunch of students to tackle that across the NESCACs? And he said, the presidents sign letters at the NESCAC schools. They do things in collaboration, but this could be something bottom up. So John is interested. Then I talked to Megan Smith, who is the 3rd CTO of the US. She was in the Obama administration. She's one of the leaders at Google for years. And she said, this should be about collaboration, that it shouldn't be NESCAC championships in sports where there's a winner. There should be teach NESCAC community members how to collaborate. And she's the one who said you should work with historic Black colleges and the tribal colleges. And she said when the NESCACs were founded, the internet wasn't there. Now the internet's at scale, and that this could be the modern, the modern movement of how higher education work. And her cousin went to Hamilton, Brad Smith, who played soccer and lacrosse, was a Psi U. And so she has an affinity. And so she said she'd be happy to help facilitate any group around this. And as the CTO of the US, she was very involved in some of the technology trends. And she pointed out, she's a trustee emeritus at MIT. And she pointed out how it was MIT years ago that had these activities that people could participate in. And a guy named Alexander Graham Bell came to one of them, and that led to the telephone. And she was very proud of Clara Barton, who grew up in Clinton and founded the Red Cross. And she said, women of color need to definitely have a voice if we're going to do this. So I said they definitely will. And the last person I mentioned I'll talk to is I talked to this guy, Juan Enriquez, who just wrote a book called Right, Wrong, How Technology Transforms Our Ethics. And if we do get a working group together, he'll donate this book to all the working group members and help facilitate a conversation that I think could be really informative. And, 150 years ago, baseball was the first collegiate sport. I think now that we're at the 50th anniversary, I think the NESCACs should show some leadership. And I think we should think about how the NESCACs can be not just sports, but be coming up with innovative thinking and solutions. And people come to our NESCAC schools because of the access to this network and this activity. And I'm throwing out a lot of ideas that needs to be shaped and formed. Yeah. But I think this is the time to do it. I think people will look back at your radio show 150 years from now and say, "Hey, that thing got started from this show."
They'll say, "What was a podcast?" Well, look, it's a brilliant idea. Clearly you've thought a lot about it, and I'm happy to amplify the message and do everything I can to put the word out. What if people are listening to this and are buying into the idea? What's the next step?
Well, I think what I'd like to do is maybe identify a leader from each of the 11 schools to want to help be part of this effort. Maybe it's someone who writes a check. Maybe it's someone who has access to the leadership, the presidents of the schools. And maybe we create a working group, and maybe we, in this time when there aren't sports going on and who knows how many seasons it's going to be, we put some of these things in motion and we experiment. But I think that we use the network effect smart. And I think we activate these. These schools are in competition with each other for students, for funding. But let's be more than the sum of our parts. And I'd love to get people who are smarter than me on this to kind of help with this. I'm just putting out there that I see an opportunity.
Yep.
And I think let's have something good come out of these times. There's a lot of hardship. The social justice side of me really worries about where society is going to be coming out of this. And I think this could be something positive that comes out of these times.
All right, who's going to join him to make it happen? It's a big idea. Could work. Should work. And if there's a guy who can make it happen, it's clearly the man who solved the prisoner's dilemma, solved Chambliss's challenge. So if you're interested in joining John on that mission, reach out to me through the show, Had I Known Show across social media, hadiknownshow@gmail.com, and we'll make sure we get you in touch with the guy who's going to make it happen. Why not unleash the power of the Hamilton Network, the power of the NESCAC network, and harness the brain power that exists on those campuses to solve some of the challenges that need to be solved in this trying time. My thanks to John Werner for joining the show. I had a lot of fun talking to him. He's a fascinating guy. You have been listening to Had I Known on WHCL-FM, Clinton, New York. HadIKnownShow.buzzsprout.com. Had I Known Show on social media. As always, my thanks to Dr. Michael Woods for supplying all the music on the show. And as always, Doc is going to play us out. Hope you enjoyed the show. Talk to you next week.
Had I Known podcast show on your radio or take it to go.